Without further ado, we will get started. Phil, I will hand over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Libby, and it's Phil Viner, though I write as PD Viner, but you weren't to know, and so I need to share my screen.
I'll just stay on while we make sure that's all working.
Ta-da! I hope everyone can see that.
Yeah, looks good to go.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So I am talking about the plan, which sounds incredibly grandiose, but my catchy logline is, or how to craft that nail-biting, where did that come from twist before you start writing. And the key thing there is before, but we're going to get to that in a short while. So why do I know anything about what I'm talking about today? So I'm an award-winning filmmaker. I have also won 4 spoken word awards for a Shakespeare series that I wrote and directed from 2000 to 2010, one of which the Guardian newspaper in the UK said was one of the best 20 audiobooks of all time. And last year I had Call and the Choice out, a twisty, suspenseful crime thriller and a nail-biter. So, most importantly, I am a successful failure. So, all of what I've just told you is absolutely true. I have won awards. I had 2 books out last year that have been very well reviewed. But in the last 20 years, I've had more failure than success. I have 3 non-published novels within the 4 published novels, and I have had a career that's gone up and down, up and down, up and down. The success is that I'm still here. I had a really good book deal with Ebury and Crown 10 years ago, then some time in the wilderness, and then another really good deal with Hera last year for the 2 books. And I have learned so much on that journey. So for the next hour, I want to talk about my mistakes, and maybe you can learn something from that, and how I have embraced the plan, and that I don't trust pants. So that sounds crazy. It sounds like I'm in a kilt all day, but pants is pantsers, people that fly by the seat of their pants, that basically sit down to write and they let the muse flow through them. And for some writers, it works really, really well. But 2 good friends of mine here in Brighton in the UK have always said they are pantsers, but just recently they've both moved to be planners. And we talk about this a lot, and they have done that because they've moved from a more traditional publishing of 1 book a year, maybe 1 book every 2 years, to writing for a digital first, where they've got 2 books coming out a year, and the expectations on them have just grown so much. And I think the expectations on writers generally have grown so much. And the first big point that I want to talk about is that we are here as writers to plan a career, not just a book. And this is absolutely the mistake that I fell into. When I wrote my first book, The Last Winter of Danny Lancing, I'd written books in my 20s and 30s that didn't go anywhere. And then I had a successful career writing audio guides and directing radio and audio. And when I came to writing a book, it was after the financial crash, and my lovely little audio business was basically dead in the water, and I had really wanted to get back to writing. My daughter was 3 years old, so I was the one at home, and it gave me some great writing time, 2 days in the creche, and I wrote during those 2 days and did a course after an evening class, where over 2 years I wrote my first book. But I concentrated on the book, not who I was as a writer or where I wanted to fit into the firmament of writing. And I didn't even know that I was a crime writer. My story was that we did a practice story, and it was for taking a Grimm's fairy tale and updating it. So I read a Grimm's fairy tale where 3 drops of blood fall onto the floor when somebody is killed and their body is hidden. And these 3 drops of blood are sentient. They call out and say, we've been murdered, come find us. And it's a great story. And I thought, that's just like DNA, that if you commit a crime, you can't help but leave a sentient message of yourself that can be found. And that idea, I wrote a 500-word short story. And at the end of that, I thought, this could be a book. I'm really excited about writing this story. And I read lots of crime, but the books I'd written in the past were actually comedies, but nobody wanted them because they weren't very funny. So I wrote The Last Winter of Danny Lancing, but I didn't think about who I was and where I was going to be a writer and what my second book would be, what my brand would be. Because when I looked for an agent, the first question my agent said, they loved the book, and they said, are you a crime writer? Because I don't want book 2 to be a love story set in space. And I said, no, I'll write you crime books. He said, I want 8 crime books. I said, okay, fair enough. So I became a crime writer, but I wasn't thinking about my brand or my legacy. And I really strongly think that at the start of your career, especially when you're writing your debut, you need to be thinking about who you are as a writer, what you're putting forward, because you're not just putting forward your first book. Apart from the fact that they will almost always ask for at least a 2-book deal, they will want to know where you're going and where you're coming from. There was a great talk on Monday that Vaseem Khan gave, and he got a 4-book deal because he really knew who he was as a writer, what the bigger themes of his work was, and he had plotted out a series of books. So in the same way that a spy will build themselves a legend, as a writer, I think you need to be thinking about that. The book is one thing, but you as a brand, as a commodity, is something else. And I hadn't appreciated any of that before I was taken on. I was just concentrating on this one book and not even thinking of it necessarily as crime, although it clearly is. And I felt like I was always playing catch up. And I hadn't gone to any talks like this where I'd been asked to think about who I was as a writer. So that is really my first idea of the plan. When you're planning, don't just think about the books you're planning. Think about who you are as a writer and where you want to go. And agents are looking for that, and so are publishers, because they want to know what they're getting from you. So that's my first bit of advice. We come on to the meat and potatoes, or if you're vegetarian, the aubergine or eggplant steak of the talk. Writing a crime book with an unputdownable twist. Why? An unputdownable thriller with a twist that will take your breath away. A gripping crime thriller with a killer twist. A totally gripping psychological thriller with a shocking twist. A gripping murder with an ending you'll never guess. A psychological thriller with edge-of-your-seat suspense. And Denise Miner has said the only responsibility a writer has is to make the book impossible to put down. And I really think with crime that this is our responsibility to the author. And even if it isn't, this is how the publishers primarily sell us. And the word unputdownable, the first time it was used was 1935 in relation to books. But over the last 20 years, and especially the last 10, the use of unputdownable has absolutely astronomically risen, because marketers are doing this for almost every crime book that is coming out. Obviously, cozies are a little bit different, although the writing, the taglines, the log lines are even in there becoming more and more hyperbolic. But the reality is that everybody, from self-published to traditional publishing to the new kind of digital first publishers, they all have access to creating amazing covers and to using these tags, this metadata, which can be embedded into the descriptions of your book online, so that the algorithms pick them up. So even if you're a writer who thinks of themselves as maybe a quiet writer, or somebody that builds psychological burn slowly, bang, it's getting harder for that kind of writer in this kind of world. A couple writer friends of mine, they don't feel like their style has particularly changed. They still think that they are a character-driven writer, a quieter writer, but their covers have become zingier, more action-packed, and the way they are described has become all about the killer twist. And as somebody who reads a lot of crime, and I work as a mentor to writers and teach, there is a real pressure for the twist, the reverse, the reveal, to beef it up. So even if you feel like you're not a writer with twists, the marketplace more and more is pushing you towards that and expecting that, which is really difficult. And I want to talk about how we can create twists, the dynamic within a novel, and also how we do that first up, how we plan for a book that creates twists. So, I believe that there are 5 components to work on which form the spine of a book, or the staircase. They are the building blocks that you use. Within that, you thread great characters, put in amazing dialogue, but the crime book, and especially thrillers and psych thrillers, but I think just about every sub-genre, every category of crime uses this working hypothesis, which is what I call the spine. And we have the hook or setup, which is like the head, the reveal, the reversal, the twist, and then the end. And I will, as we're talking about it, I will use the call as my spoilers, because even though I'd love you to read it, it's the one I know best, and also I don't want to spoil anybody else's book. So let us talk about these 5 elements, and I'm going to have a quick drink of water, which was dead nice, thank you. What they do is create this corkscrew through the time of the book, with layers of vertebrae, and if it's really twisted, then a scoliosis going through it. The hook, or the setup, is where you start. There are absolutely brilliant setups and hooks. I think one of the very best, I don't know if you've read Before I Go to Sleep, it opens with a woman waking up, and when she looks in the mirror, she doesn't recognize herself. And it's because for the last few decades, she hasn't been creating new memories. So she wakes up every day with the slate clean. Fabulous setup. With the call, the setup is that a man is woken up at midnight by the phone ringing and his wife shouting for him to pick up. He does pick up, and she tells him that she's killed a man, that it was an accident, but she needs him to come to her. And when he agrees, she says, "And can you bring me bleach, bin bags, towels, a hammer, and a carving knife?" There's the cover. Now, I had said right at the start that the key to this talk was the before component, that we wanted to talk about how we create these twists, the reveal, the reversal, the twist, the end. Now, within a book, say it's 350 pages, I think of it as being 50 or 70 pages And in that time, I want at least one reveal, reversal, or twist. Let me tell you a bit about the difference between the three as I see them, and you can disagree. But essentially, they are all a change in direction or something that makes you go, oh, that's exactly what you want to do to your reader. Now, I think of a reveal as being something that's internal that we didn't know. So within the call, the husband gets to the address that his wife's given him, and it turns out to be a seedy hotel. And when he's inside, he finds a very handsome, very dead, very naked man. And it's obvious that his wife has been having an affair. I think of a reveal as something which is is something that we could guess or has just been covered over. There's obviously something happening with their marriage. We pull away the cloth to reveal what's underneath it. A reversal, to my mind, is something which is, generally speaking, external, which makes the characters feel like they can't get on with something, that they've come to a standstill, that what they thought was true isn't, that instead of going up, they're coming down. And a twist is something that comes out of the blue, is often external. So within the call, the first big twist is that they clean up the room, they put the body into a makeshift body bag that they've created, they throw the body out of a window, they clean up the room, and they are about to leave when suddenly the husband says, let's just do a final check, and we haven't looked in the wardrobe. He pulls the wardrobe door open, and there is a video camera inside that is filming the bed. And suddenly, an external force has come in and completely changed the dynamic of the book. And it also changes the dynamic between the husband and wife, because so far, the wife has been in charge. She has killed this man by accident, and she is desperate to make this right, to move on with her life. And in finding the video camera, she crumples because she doesn't know anything about why this was here. It's a complete reveal, complete twist for her, and the husband takes over. And these reveal, reversal, twists, changes of direction need to come in every section to keep us reading. With the call, it starts at midnight, ends at 8 AM, and every chapter is half an hour. So it reads in real time, and you literally every half an hour, something happens to make them go, oh my God, not something else. I did throw the kitchen sink at it, and sometimes it feels, I mean, not all of these things could possibly happen to one couple in one night. And yet, within the parameters of the book, they could. So anyway, what I really want to talk to you is how we plan those twists, reversals, how we work out the hook and the end, and how I think about these moments in the book are like stones being dropped into a pond or a body of water, that there is an enormous splash, which is the event, and then the ripples cascade outwards until the next drop of a stone. And that if you think about the idea of the book having a spine, that there are these splashes through the book and the ripples right out, and sometimes the ripples can be quite light, but other times they are incredibly dramatic and everything changes. And the way I write is something that I call lucid daydreaming. If people don't know what lucid dreaming is, it's that when you're dreaming, if you feel like, if you recognize that you're dreaming, you can almost enter your dream, a bit like Inception, and take control over where it goes and play out scenarios, make what you want to happen. It's about taking control of your subconscious. And lucid daydreaming is exactly that. It's like Sherlock's mind palace, where he can visualize something, move it across, or a bit like Minority Report, where you think about scenes and roll them like you're watching a film. Now, I've always been very visual. I went to film school. My earliest creative efforts were in film and theatre, and I've come to novel writing from this sense of wanting to see the scenes, and I think of my writing as being screenwriterly in some ways. But in the same way that Hemingway, for example, considers being a camera, he describes what he can see. I take that a little bit further in that I control what I see. And I don't write anything except some notes until I have run the scenarios in my head. A bit like in Star Trek, they had the holodeck and they could run simulations. What I am suggesting is this idea of running simulations in your head, and that you create the scenes, create the characters, and direct them as if you're a film director. So, for example, the very first thought I had with the call was not, what is my setup? Who are my characters? Where is it set? My very first thought is, what if a married couple find a surveillance camera, find that they're being spied on? What is that going to do to them. And I essentially sat and daydreamed how this would work. Because if I sat down, and this is how I started writing, and I would start a scene and I would go so far with it, maybe spend a couple of days in it, maybe get to 8,000 words and feel like, oh, that isn't working. Scrap the lot, start again, maybe take an idea from it. But that, A, is very time consuming, and B, I think that uses up your best ideas very quickly. It makes them potentially very dry. Whereas if I throw out an idea, couple find a camera, it's been watching them, how is that going to play out? And then I start running scenarios, and that splash of the ripples starts moving across, and then I have an idea for a second stone to drop in, which may be working forwards or working backwards, and I haven't necessarily got a story yet, or even characters that I know I want to work with, because all of that can come later. And the reality is I'm only spending a few hours on this, whereas I might spend weeks working on the first, the opening of a new book. Say I start at the opening, and after 20,000 words, I feel like this isn't really going anywhere. And that's happened to me on a number of occasions, and to other writers. We talk about how we write a lot. I have a support group that meets once a month that I set up, and we're not writing together, we're not sharing our writing. What we are doing is throwing out our ideas and setting ourselves goals, like in the next month I will do this work, I will research this, I will write 10,000 words from here. And saying it to other writers means that somebody is there to hold me account, and I love that, because I can be really lazy and not get on with it. So coming back to the plan, let's go back. I think traditionally the hook, the setup, is where writers start. For me, the danger of that is that by the time you get to the end isn't very satisfying. I really do find so often that with crime books, I am so excited by the opening ideas, but where we're going with it hasn't necessarily been thought of, or if it has, it's been sketched out, and as the writing process takes on and the novel goes like that, the ending becomes further and further away. I find that thinking of it as starting from the big ideas, those key moments, because I don't know about you, but what I remember of novels and movies are those scenes that have gripped me. And to think about the heart of the book as being that twist, that moment that encompasses the book, I think is really key. In The Call, the second moment that I came to was that the husband discovers that he has been drugged by his wife, that she gave him Rohypnol to make him sleep. That was why she so she could go out and meet this man, obviously not knowing that he was going to be accidentally killed. And I didn't have the opening, but coming up with that dropped brick into the pond, for me, that was the ultimate gaslighting that she could possibly do, and that it was a huge emotional weight to drop into the book. And the ripples that went out from that were huge, and riding those ripples back gave me the start. I knew he would have to be asleep. He's crumpled up on the floor. He doesn't remember where the night before. He doesn't know why he's in his best suit. He doesn't know where his phone is. He finds his wife's bag, which has got her keys, her money, her phone in it. She never goes out without those things. It creates so many questions, and it's I think, a fantastic reveal. But it didn't come out of me creating the novel and moving in a linear fashion. It started from me thinking, what is the brick that gets dropped after we find the video camera? And then I create the linking, the stories that go back. I think it's a way of working that in crime is really fantastic. Asks so much of you as a writer, but also it creates these blocks of the spine, and I create them just using lucid daydreaming. This is one of the scenes, the pink post-it notes. I also walk around with a dictaphone, or I've got my recorder on my phone, and I speak images. I then sit, generally with a coffee, I do love coffee, and imagine how this works. I try and cast the characters. I think about the backgrounds, the colors, what's going on. The call is set at night, and I set it in one of the sleaziest parts of London that as a kid I really didn't like walking around. Essentially, it's Earl's Court, which is where the people live that are working in the really nice boroughs of like Kensington, but they can't afford to live there, so they live in these like quite squalid blocks of flats, and often hotels and hostels, and there's prostitution in the area. And I walked around at night with a little dictaphone and a little notebook, taking those images. You could do it on Street View as well, though you don't always get nighttime for Street View. But it grounds your work to think of it as explosive scenes rather than 100,000 words that starts at the start and ends at the end. To break it down into these explosions, these twists, these reversals, these reveals, I find it is a really great way to write, especially crime that moves at a pace. So my big point is to try and dream each scene, run through the permutations, run it. I often will sit with a dictaphone and play both characters. I do have an acting bent, which does make it a bit easier, and you might find yourself a bit silly, but it's really good for dialogue to try and put yourself in your characters' bodies, speak like they would speak. When I've taught dialogue classes in the past, I try and randomize the work we do. Sometimes, which is a bit mean, I will say, who's the least likely person for you to speak through? And then I will ask them to be that person. I will ask them to be a child of a different gender. I will ask them to be an old homeless man. I would try to get them to put themselves in the body of somebody else, which is what actors do, and then to create that dialogue, run those permutations and make the notes. And then for me, it's all in my head. I can see it, and then when I come to write, it is so much easier to exercise from me, rather than sitting there going, my God, what happens next? What am I going to do? To basically create the film in my head and then write what I see. I always read it back, and I'm really lucky. I've got some actor friends. I will often get them to run the dialogue so that I can hear it from people's own mouths and work with it. But I would get it really tight so I know it and then write. The last thing I want to say before I finish, I talked about my writers support group, which is practical. It isn't about writing together. But the other thing I do is shut up and write. And I've organised some all-night writes. But in my hometown in Brighton, there are a lot of really great writers, some crime, but others. And we have a large community. And 3 years ago, I put an ad out saying, who wants to meet up a couple of days a week, write together, and we're not sharing, but we are writing together. So every Wednesday and Thursday, 2 or 3 writers come over. I make a bowl of soup, and we sit from 10 until 5. We do at least 4 hours, maybe 5, and we write together. And it's fantastic, because if I'm on my own, I go up all the time. I go make coffee, I go make toast. I put on so much weight and I don't get much done. If I'm working with other writers, I do so much more. So Shut Up and Write are brilliant. Uh, you can use libraries, you can use cafes, although you do need to buy a coffee, or you can rotate people's houses. But it's a really good way of making yourself right. That is all I have to say. And we have 10 minutes for questions. The only thing I would say is if you want to know more about me, my website is pdviner.com, and I would love to answer any questions you might have in a week's time. I also, if you want to join my mailing list, I will tell you more about what I'm doing, because what I am doing in October is filming a very low budget version of The Call, which I am crowdfunding at the moment, and I will leave it at that. So, Livy, thank you so much. Are there any questions, or do people just want to get away from me because I was so boring?
Yeah, no, people have been really enjoying the presentation, and there's been discussion about pantsers and plotters in the chat. Lots of discussion about all the various ideas, and we do have a few questions if you're happy to.
Oh, of course I am.
Lovely. And I'm sure that number will only go up as we start answering these. So Jim asked, have you considered self-publishing your unpublished books?
So yes, I have. And so it's very interesting that just this week, Ali, the Alliance of Independent Writers, have put out a really great article, basically saying that you get more money being self-published than you do traditional publishing. It's a really interesting article. I think self-publishing is really brilliant. From being a businessman, I know that actually I'm not the best businessman. And what I really want to do is write. But I do, the 3 novels I've got, one of them in particular is my best book. And twice editors said they wanted it, but the marketing team said, actually, it's a really hard sell. And it got nicked. So yes, I am going to self-publish that, probably with the start of the next year, and do all 3 together, unless something else happens. But really, my main thing at the moment is I'm working on the film, which is taking up my time. So next question.
Yalamid asked, could you tell them about your experience as a filmmaker or screenwriter and how that differs to writing a novel?
Oh, I could talk for ages. I mean, I went to film school. Short films I've made have shown all over the London Film Festival, and I had some success. The jump up to making a feature is so huge, and I'm not the best networker. What I will say, so when my first book came out, Danny Lancing, I sold the rights to Warner Brothers, and Showtime actually bought it, and the Dexter team came on board to write scripts, and it had directors, it was cast. I was working on a Bible for that. At the same time, because of that, ITV asked me to do something. I spent about 18 months working on projects, and they completely fell by the wayside. Nothing got made. Screenwriting is so frustrating, and when you do write it, everything then gets filtered through so many people that I do know screenwriters that say they don't recognize their work. The thing about writing novels is it's all yours. You live or die by it, and you make all the decisions. An editor will make certain suggestions, but essentially it's you in a book, and I really love that. And I found with The Call, I mean, Ben and Mia, I think about them all the time, and and I'm never going to write something because it takes place over 8 hours. It's such a, well, it's still expensive, but it's an easy setup. Nobody else is going to make it, so I am making it myself. But I love screenwriting, but you don't have any control.
Yeah, so sort of having that that control over your input and then other people's input, because I suppose you get the editing cycle, you get to see all the edits that have been made to your novel.
And I write because I want to be read. In the same way that if I make a film, I want it to be seen. But I've worked on so many projects that have come to nothing. And at the end of the day, nothing's seen, nothing's read. You get some money, but that's not the point of being creative. The point of being creative is putting something out in the world to be judged or to be enjoyed, but that there's, your baby's there. And in screenwriting so far, unless I've made it myself with my own money that I've raised, my babies are stillborn, which sounds horrible, but that's how it feels.
Linda has asked, so you spoke about the hook, reveal, reflection cycle. How often does that happen in a book? Sort of, do you have a sense of how many pages each time that happens, or is it kind of?
So obviously, I mean, there was a lot to say in an hour. When I was talking about know yourself, know your genre, your subgenre, how it works. If you're writing some kind of thriller, psychological thriller or domestic horror or something like that, say it's 350 pages, I think something needs to happen every 50 pages, if not more. Obviously, the hook is there right at the start, and this is why so many novels have prologues, so that you can have something really exciting and then calm down and build up. But the reality is, if you're sending it out to an agent, if they're not hooked on first 10 pages, almost all of them stop reading. It's the same with publishers. It's the same with the Kindle. When you've got the Kindle sample, you read that first sample, you go, am I going to bother? So your hook needs to really hook and set it up. And I would say either a twist, a reversal, or a reveal. And they're my words, but that's how I think of them in my head. You want one of those happening. Well, the first one should be 30 pages in, second one 70 pages in, 100, so that there is an escalation, but also it gives it energy. I really do like this image of a brick hitting and the ripples coming out. That energy, that explosive energy, needs to push your characters forward. Because otherwise, you don't want. It doesn't have to be frantic, but something happens that elevates you, that makes you want to go forward and go, ah!
Yeah, because we all in our lives try and take subconsciously take the path of least resistance. If you don't do something that makes your character do something, they're not just going to up and do something interesting if nothing happens to make them.
Absolutely. And if you think of yourself as oh my God, I don't want to have an explosion, but you want something, something that's found, something that, the thing that I do is I give my characters 5 items that they've always got with them that have some really strong emotional resonance to something that happened to them. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I would just get them to pull out, like they pick something out of their pocket, but it's got the C&D badge on it that their mum gave them, or they've got, and you can create, you can fabricate, you can make something happen, even if you don't want suddenly somebody to jump out the bushes and go, all right, Gov. It can be something, the tool can be subtle, but the effect has to have an emotional heft or a plot heft. You know, if you can do both, if everything can have an emotional heft, then you're really creating something that propels you forwards.
Do those things have to be external in your view? So Eileen asked, do twists need to come via an external force, or can they be something that happens internally?
So external and internal should be balanced. What I really hate, and I do see a lot, is at some point in the book, a character that I feel like I know does something completely out of character to create a swing, a shift, a twist. And I always go, oh no, your characters should have a real strength of purpose and not do something. But within the call, that moment where you suddenly realize that she used Rehypnol on Ben has such an emotional heft. I think it works, and it's just a click in his head where he suddenly goes, you used it on me. And actually, it's in what's been a really heavy, they've just killed the second brother. But that isn't the drop of the stone and the ripples. The ripples are what happens afterwards. Is, I mean, she drugs him and then just lowers him into the water and he drowns. And Ben realizes she must have had that on her, and then clicks that she used that on him.
And if she's done it to somebody else, then it's not unexpected that she could have done it to him. It's not like, whoa, she's done.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that what that does is it makes you go, oh, the opening now makes complete sense. Because I wondered why he was so woozy, why he was still dressed. You know, it's only midnight, and it ties it all up. And I think you go, oh, and those kind of moments are always so galvanizing for the reader, because you go, oh, I could have guessed that. And some people might go, I guessed that. Anyway, so yeah, so they don't need to be, they can be external or they can be internal. You just need to balance them, and they really have to be appropriate. Your character shouldn't do something out of character.
Yeah. Oh, well, Phil, thank you so much for sharing your time. I'm sure your voice must be going all the time. Just so you know, you've had loads of comments saying how much they've enjoyed the session and your analogy of the spine. Lots of good luck wishes for your film as well. Yeah, just lots of people saying they've really enjoyed it and gotten a lot from it. So
good.
Yeah, and lots of people saying thank you. So yeah.
Well, thank us. I mean, everybody, thank you. Really good luck with whatever you're doing, writing. I did mean it. If you want to send me messages, phil@pdviner.com. Look at the website. It's not the best website in the world, but and I will be updating it soon with all of the film stuff. So it was really lovely. It's been a brilliant week. I'm really enjoying watching other sessions. So yeah, so good luck, and thank everybody out there.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming along. I've just put some links in the chat, including that link to Phil's website too. And you'll be able to find more information on the Crime Week Hub as always as well. So yeah, thank you, Phil, and thank you everyone for joining us.
All right.
All right, speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.